Good evening, everyone. I'm Kurt Asher. I'm Dean of the Library here, and I wanted to welcome all of you to our candidates to the. I particularly want to welcome our candidates, Kern County District Attorney candidates Scott Spielman and Cynthia Zimmer. This debate will allow us all to get better acquainted with the candidates and their platforms and vision for the District Attorney's Office. I want to remind you again, I know there's a lot of people standing up, that there are overflow rooms. There's an overflow room on the lower level, there's an overflow room on this floor, and there's an overflow room on the second floor. So I'm hoping that if you want to sit down, you can. So, all right. Before we get started, I want to publicly thank and acknowledge some of the people who made this event possible. First and foremost has been Janine Craybill of the CSUB Political Science Department, who's been absolutely tenacious in her efforts to bring this event to the CSUB library, and without her, none of this would have happened. I'd also like to thank our incredible library staff, Teresita Overden, Chris Livingston, Eileen Montoya, Frank Aguirre, and Kathy Driscoll for leading the logistics and promotions and helping with the organization of this event. Another major thank you goes to the students in the legal reasoning class, the Pre-Law Society, and the Political Science Club for researching the questions and helping assist with the debate. Jack Dixon, our student assistant, will be live tweeting this event. And of course, a huge thanks to Dr. David Schechter for moderating this event. I'd also like to acknowledge some people, beginning with the members and affiliates of the CSUB Pre-Law Advisory Board, as well as any member of the Bakersfield College Advisory Board who are here. If any of you are here, would you please stand up so we can acknowledge you? One other person I'd like to mention is our Chief of Police, Marty Williamson, for helping with this. So thanks to all of you for coming. Some of you know that we lost a very dear colleague recently, and our friend Stanley Eugene Clark died of cancer on April 12th. And Mark Martinez is here to say a few words about him before we get started.
Thank you for coming. I've got to tell you that Gene Clark, he was the one who hired me in the Department of Political Science. And so losing him last week hit us especially hard. But I got to tell you, Gene would have loved to have been here. He loved showing up at these events. And as a matter of fact, he would be the first one to tell Scott and Cindy, thank you for helping to demonstrate to our students the spirit of democracy and what it is to live in a civil society. So I want to thank you, Cindy and Scott, for being here. We really, really appreciate it, and Gene would have loved it. I'm going to be brief because Gene never was. It was one of the beauties about Gene. He took the time to explain things to you, but he also liked a good story. So I'm going to, this happened last week. I found out he was in the hospital, and so I had a running theme with Gene, and you guys have been told, and I think we've all been told, you never know what's happening when people are in their last moments. But that they can sense you, they understand what you're telling them, et cetera. And so that's where I was with Gene yesterday. And so, not yesterday, last week. And so, thinking about that, I got kind of bored sitting around, just kind of watching in the hospital. And so, I went up and I saw Gene's eyes open. And I said, you know, Gene, I got to tell you, you're not a Republican. And you've never been a Republican. And his eyes opened up. And I started looking at him, and you could tell, and his stepdaughters were laughing. And so what Gene and I had, it was really special because Gene was the type of person who liked to talk politics. And it wasn't just academic. He liked the little poke. And so what I want to say is that at the end of the day, Gene wanted to be here. Gene loved the spirit of democracy. Gene loved the spirit of debate. And Scott, Cindy, I want to thank you for being here. And with that, I think I'll turn it over to Provost Schechter. And for one housekeeping thing, if everybody can get their phones, turn off their phones, and thank you, and we'll see you guys probably about an hour and a half.
Hello, everybody, and welcome. I'm David Schechter, and I'm the vice provost here. Our provost, Jenny Zorn, has not given me a promotion yet or anything, so I'll be the moderator tonight. I was just going to share with the group some of the rules of the road that we shared with the candidates earlier, and just give you a little lay of the land of how we're going to handle this tonight. I was chair of the political science department at Fresno State for 5 years before coming here. So I love campaigns, I love debates, I love politics, and it's just an honor to host this event tonight. And I need to thank Dean Asher and his staff, as well as you heard Dr. Craybill, Dr. Cargile, Dr. Martinez, and others from the political science department who've helped put this together. So I'm going to have some timekeepers who are going to help me up here tonight as well, Asau and Debray, and we're going to be holding up some cards for the candidates as we, clock what's happening with some of the answers. Our goal is to kind of be wrapped up by about 7:30. So if all goes well, we'll be here about an hour and a half or so. So unless you really need to leave, please stay with us during that time. And we're going to have two parts to the debate. The candidates are going to give some 2-minute opening statements in just a moment, and we had a coin toss earlier as to who's going to go first on that. Then we're going to take some student written questions. So in a couple of the political science classes, they have been crafting student questions just for this debate. So we want to get through as many as we can of those tonight. They're terrific questions. My apologies if you're a student here tonight who crafted a question that we may not get to, because we ended up having almost 40 of them, and we did as best we could to narrow down and pick questions for tonight. That will go on to a few minutes after 5, and then we're going to have some questions from the audience. So Dr. Cargile, will you raise your hand? So Dr. Cargile is right there, and her and some student helpers, most of whom have the black shirts on and whatnot, they will be taking your questions. So they have pencils at the ready, they have note cards, so as the debate goes on, if you would like to share a question, the last 15, 20 minutes or so before 7:30, we will go through those questions as rapidly as we can and just get those questions to the candidates. Then we will do some closing statements, and then the candidates have agreed to stay around afterwards as well to talk with you and to answer any additional questions you might have. So that'll be the game plan for tonight. A couple of the ground rules. Up here, we're going to use first names. I'm going to say Scott and Cindy. They're going to call me David, and we're just going to keep it informal tonight as well. I'm going to allow exchanges to continue. If there's a question going on and it looks like somebody needs an extra 20 seconds or 30 seconds, I'm going to let that go if it seems like we're all engaged and interested in that response. At the same time, trying to balance that with getting through as many questions as we can, right? So we want to do both tonight. So I'll ask the candidates to please keep an eye on the signs that are up here for your 1-minute warnings and your stop warning that's going to come at the end. For the audience, there's only 2 rules for you. 1, Dr. Martinez mentioned, which is please silence your cell phones. Number 2, no shouting, interrupting of the candidates. We're here to listen to their ideas, right? So let's be good hosts here at CSUB so we can have more candidates come to campus like we have tonight. And in other words, just please be on your best behavior. No jeering, no whistling, no cat calls, except for right now. So right now, please join me in welcoming our 2 candidates, Cindy Zimmer and Scott Spielman. As I mentioned before, by a coin toss, we decided who would get the opening statement, and Scott will give our first 2-minute opening statement. And I also asked the candidates beforehand to please give us a little bit of background and anything about you personally that our audience should know about. So, Scott, please start us off.
Thank you for having both of us. It's surprising this place is so full. It's also kind of humbling, so thank you for coming. A little bit about myself. When I graduated from high school, I wanted to be a police officer. I was too young, so I started college but just wasn't ready, and then I went into the Army for 3 years. I went in as a military police officer, wanted to be a civilian police officer. It made sense, and I was in for 3 years. And once I got out, I was a sergeant, and I had money for college, and so I figured I'd give it another try, and it made me more disciplined. And so I went back, finished at junior college, and then I hate to say this in here, I went up the street a little bit to Fresno State and graduated from there with a criminology degree. Still want to be a police officer, but I did very well in school. And my cousin, who was a police officer in Fresno, when he found out I had good grades, suggested trying law school. And so I took the test. I did well enough. I went to McGeorge in Sacramento. And when I graduated from there, I went back down south. I took the bar. I passed the first time. And I was actually swinging a hammer doing construction. I'd done that almost every summer during school and growing up. My father had a small construction company down south. And then I interviewed here, and I got offered a job, and I came here 24 years ago as a prosecutor. Been in the office for those 24 years. Most of the first about 15 years, I just did a lot of trials. I did 105 felony jury trials. And then got into supervision, supervised for a couple of years, and then when Lisa Green became the newest district attorney for Kern County, she promoted me to the position of assistant district attorney. In our office, Lisa is the elected DA, and then below her is me as the assistant DA, and then there's a chief deputy DA, 9 supervisors, and the rest of the balance of about 90 prosecutors that we have in the office. And so I've been the assistant DA for about 7 years now, and when Lisa decided she wasn't going to run, I took a look at it, and seeing that I had the best qualifications for it based on my experience, I had the temperament, I had the desire, and I had the reasons for wanting to run. And so I have her backing, her endorsement, as well as law enforcement. So very glad to be here. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Cindy, your opening statement.
Thank you. What an honor to be here this evening, to come back here to the place where I graduated and got my start. I'm a graduate of Cal State Bakersfield, class of 1981. It's particularly an honor to have been taught by Dr. Ray Geigel, Dr. Charles McCall, and Dr. Gene Clark, who was one of my teachers. Those 3 men taught me important things. They taught me to work for your community, and when you graduate, get outside into the community and do something important. Well, today, I'm running for district attorney, and I think they'd be proud of me, that I've had the courage to come from this institution and get back into the community and work at the DA's office for 33 years and throw my hat in the ring. I'm running for district attorney because we deserve better. This community has some issues. We have some problems. 2017 was our deadliest year on record with 101 homicides. We had children who were shot and killed in their beds over gang rivalries. And just a few feet from here, a few years ago, Bianca Jackson, an 18-year-old girl, was gunned down. She was killed in a crossfire because of gang violence. The level of violence in this community is unacceptable. I'm running for district attorney because I'm the best person for the job. I have the experience, the skills, and the courage to do what is right for this county in order to keep people safe. I am a leader. I have led because I have done serious, complicated jury trials, and I have won them. I am ready for this job. I am ready to be elected, and I am ready to lead this county. Thank you.
Thank you to you both, and please know that you can take the microphone out of the stand if that's helpful to you as well. The first question will go to Cindy tonight. Being on a college campus, we thought we'd begin with a question about campus safety. Do you think that allowing teachers, whether they be elementary school, middle school, high school, or college, to carry guns in this county is a good option, or would it be a problem? How can we curb gun violence in our schools?
Thank you. I am also a teacher. I'm an adjunct professor at Taft College. Taft, an area where gun violence was something that was a reality, not just a thought. I've thought about it many times as I taught in my class, where there is one way in and one way out. I've gone to active shooter trainings, and I've talked to my students, something I never thought I'd have to do, about what to do if somebody came in with a firearm. And our best defense was a fire extinguisher or a chair. I think that we should allow teachers to carry guns on campus if certain things are met. If teachers are qualified and pass certain rigorous tests like a law enforcement officer would. If they are qualified like in law enforcement and go to reoccurring training. Because I'll tell you, it is difficult to be able to deal with difficult situations, with spontaneous situations. And I don't think that too many of us would qualify. I've qualified as an 832 officer, I've qualified. But I'm telling you, under the stress of the excitement, it would be difficult. However, my obligation, and I would give my life for my students, and my obligation would be to keep them safe. So if certain teachers wanted to go through the training and wanted to be qualified in something as rigorous as on this campus as Chief Marty Williamson would allow, then I think it should be allowed, but only under certain circumstances.
And we have 1 minute rebuttals tonight for each 2-minute answer. Scott, the rebuttal?
I do think it should be up to the individual school districts. I think the most important thing, though, to try to prevent these school shootings is to start with mental illness. It has not been addressed well enough. I was proud to help start a mental health court in our county, the first one, to try to get people that have serious mental illness, bipolar, schizophrenic, so serious that they need medication. Get them, instead of on the lower level crimes, get them into a program, a structured environment, especially if they need the medication, they have to take it. It's an attempt to get them back on their feet. Try to identify those people that are the danger so we can protect everyone else, and we can also try to help them to improve their lives, get them on their feet if they're in the justice system. It's a smarter way of doing things. And as we look at the shootings and we look at the perpetrators, we look and see most often it's going to be people with severe mental illness. If our country doesn't do what we need to do to address issues, instead of just simply arguing partisan things, let's get some real solutions. Start with mental illness.
Can you respond specifically to do you think allowing teachers to carry guns in this county is a good option?
As I said at the beginning, I think it should be up to the individual jurisdictions, the school districts. They should go through it. And as there's requirements in California that there's limitations on ownership of weapons, you have to have a CCW permit to carry a concealed weapon. You should have the same type of regulations that are going to be required if somebody is going to be carrying on school grounds.
Thank you. Scott, the second question goes to you. The media has covered Kern County law enforcement in a negative light for some time. Bakersfield was labeled as the deadliest police force in the U.S. Kern County has been named, quote, the deadliest police enforcement agency in the nation. What is your plan as DA to change that perception? Will you handle cases differently, particularly those concerning officer-involved shootings?
We actually started something prior to the Guardian was the media source that came out with that. Before that came out, we recognized in our office the need for the DA's office to act independently from the police agencies. As an independent review, when there's officer-involved shootings and somebody is injured or killed, we had never reviewed those cases unless they were requesting criminal charges, which was very, very rare. Prior to, it was about 2.5 years ago, almost 3 now, we implemented, and I actually had to come up with a procedure, and I went to the agencies to work this through, that we now do officer-involved shooting reviews in our county. We had never done them before. We realized the need for it. We were one of the last counties to do it. And doing so did not make us very popular, especially with the police union boards. But it was something that we recognized that we cannot just simply rubber stamp things, that just as you see in the Law and Order show, you have two separate groups. They act independently and they're both important. The district attorney in every county needs to be independent, needs to be fair. We started doing the reviews. We would detail what factually happened in each one of those cases. We weren't looking to second guess, because they have to make a split-second decision. We weren't looking to second guess if they did the best option. We looked to see whether or not, based on the information, they acted reasonably. And we detailed each one of those to show exactly what happened so that the public, the good people that support law enforcement, I support law enforcement, I was law enforcement, the good people in our county expect us to do our job also. And so we had already implemented officer-involved shooting reviews. So fortunately, we had recognized it and addressed it before it happened, before that came out. Thank you.
Thank you. Cindy, your 1-minute rebuttal.
The Guardian was a sensational liberal newspaper or newscaster that basically didn't fairly report the accurate state of affairs in Kern County. Officer-involved shootings are on their way down. What's rapidly on their way up are crimes against peace officers, and those are shootings against officers. I do agree, however, that with good training, that we can all, law enforcement included, do better. We can do better. We instituted a plan of officer-involved shooting review, and I totally agree with that. And I don't think it made us unpopular with law enforcement. Law enforcement, I think, is very grateful that there is another level of review. The attorneys who review those officer-involved shootings, many of whom are here tonight. So I think it's a good idea. I don't think that we are truly one of the deadliest counties in America as reported. I think that was a bit of journalism, assassination journalism, that went after some of our law enforcement officials. But I am very proud to be part of the law enforcement community in Kern County.
Thank you. Question number 3. Cindy, we'll start with you on this one. Sticking with local policing for a moment. Over the past 2 years, a number of police departments in California have outfitted their police officers with body-worn cameras. Since Sacramento and the legislature has not been able to agree on body camera rules and police officers have a wide range of when they can turn cameras on and off, how will you, as the DA, go about not only releasing footage to the public to provide transparency and accountability, but as evidence in order to prosecute criminal acts?
Well, evidence that would be retrieved from body cameras would be evidence just like any other piece of evidence you would have in a criminal case, whether it be the seizure of a firearm or a police report or a video from a store. It would be a similar piece of evidence. So it would be inappropriate to release that type of information pending trial because it could affect the trial. I do support, however, the wearing of body cameras, and I am grateful that law enforcement is going to do that so the public can see the whole story, not the cell phone camera that starts with the incident of violence halfway through, that they can see the whole thing from beginning, middle, and end. They can understand what law enforcement goes through when they're out there at night making an arrest of someone they don't know who they are stopping. So I fully support that. I'm excited that I'm the gang supervisor at the DA's office, and the Bakersfield Police Department is going to put body cameras on SEU. That's the gang unit at the police department. So that should be really interesting. It will be interesting for us gathering all that, storing the data, getting it to the defense. So it'll be some growing pains for us technologically. But I'm very excited about it, and I think that it can do nothing but help our relationship with the community out there that maybe in the past has distrusted the police, that now they'll be able to see more and be a part of what's going on so they can understand, and we can all come together as one to do the best that we can to make sure that this community is safe.
We actually have body cameras being used in the county already. The CHP has it called MVARs, and they've had it for about 7 years. I know this because I got together with them to figure out how we were going to be able to use it in our criminal cases and prosecutions. The Sheriff's Department has it out in Wasco. They had a grant that allowed them to start it out in Wasco, and so I had to meet with the Sheriff's Department to try to figure out how we were going to retrieve the information. The CHPs, it starts as soon as they turn on emergency lights. The system will start automatically. And so I would anticipate that something similar would happen with the other agencies. I think they're starting to implement them further, and I think that they are beneficial. In body cameras, what the leadership of the police departments have found out is that actually the number of complaints against the police goes down. The reason why is because everything's videotaped. It's right there, and so you're less likely to have false accusations. So I think it's beneficial.
Thank you. The next question goes to you, Scott. The media, what is your definition of plea bargaining, and what direction will you be giving to your senior staff about the use of plea bargaining? What are the pros and cons of plea bargaining, in other words, and how will it be used if you're DA?
Plea bargaining is something I refer to as a necessary evil. We have about anywhere between, in the last 7 years, 6,000 to 9,000 felony cases each year. We have approximately 22,000 misdemeanor cases. We have 90 attorneys. We do about 200 felony jury trials each year. So if you look at those numbers, 200 trials, 6,000 to 9,000 cases. It's a necessary evil. The system would absolutely break if we didn't have it. You have to approach it smartly. You use your experience, you use the law, you use the evidence, and you figure out the quality of a case and look at the range of what a plea bargain could be done. And we have been aggressive in how we have prosecuted cases. When you're looking at plea bargaining, you're taking a look at the level of the evidence, the quality of the evidence. When it comes to the more violent crimes, you're less likely to plea bargain. You're more likely to have a much higher offer when it's a violent felony. In other cases, you are going to plea bargain cases, but you need to do it responsibly. You put in people that are going to be experienced for the prosecutors. You're going to have you want somebody who's experienced doing it. When we have the newer attorneys, they tend to be in units that have supervisors that will go in and do the negotiations. That way we know we're going to get the best representation on those cases. When it comes down to it, we know that there are victims, there are families that have been affected. And so we're going to make the best decision that we can under the circumstances. But it is something that's necessary that we do. It's just that you want to be responsible in doing it.
Thank you.
I don't think the public fully understands plea bargaining. I think the expression plea bargaining has a negative connotation, and it makes it sound as though someone that plea bargains is weak. The truth of it is that people who commit violent felonies, their cases should not be pled. I'm the supervisor of the gang unit, and we do not plea bargain our homicides unless there's something that happens that's pretty dramatic difference. But a first-time person, a first-time criminal, someone that commits a crime where the sentencing range is worth, something like 3 years, you probably wouldn't ask for the maximum on a first-time person. You would want to do the best that you could for that individual, judging by what crime it is and what their record is, and do the right thing for the right person at the right time. Not everyone deserves the maximum sentence. Some people really benefit from probation, especially if they have the drug issues. However, when it comes to the violent crimes, those cases should not be pled, because every day that a violent felon spends in custody is the potential for a day that a life is saved.
Thank you. The next question goes to you, Cindy, as well. Let's look at a couple of statewide issues. Given that California has been declared a sanctuary state, do you think Kern County will comply with California's standards on the treatment of undocumented immigrants? And what is your view on Kern County officials cooperating with ICE, the Immigration and Customs Enforcement?
Well, sanctuary cities has been something that has certainly been debated in the news over quite some time. It's an issue that the district attorney doesn't really deal with because it is a custodial issue. It is a custodial issue. It's an issue for the sheriff, whether or not the sheriff will turn over someone who is an undocumented resident after they finish their sentence from the county jail. It is unfortunate that so much has happened, and so much violence that is occurring and deaths that have resulted as a result of some of this and what has happened. What is most important to me as a prosecutor is that victims who are undocumented report crime. That victims are not afraid to come forward and be concerned that they will be deported if they report crime. I prosecuted the East Side rapist, Billy Ray Johnson, who sexually assaulted 9 women and children. He picked women who were Hispanic, who he believed were undocumented, because he didn't think they would call the police after they were raped. You know what? Every one of those women called the police. One of them was undocumented, and we were successful in getting that young lady, a Bakersfield College student, a U visa, so she could stay in this country. So as far as sanctuary cities and the sheriff's responsibility of when he does or does not turn over persons who have been convicted who are undocumented, that's not an issue for us. We don't pay attention when we prosecute people, whether they are documented or undocumented.
Thank you.
When it comes to people that are committing crimes in Kern County, it doesn't matter to me whether or not they are here legally or illegally. If you commit a crime in Kern County, you need to be held accountable. The U visa system, to let you know what that is something that actually I developed our office policy several years ago on the U visas. U visa is that somebody, either they or a member of their immediate family, if they're a victim of crime, they can apply for a U visa. We fill out a certification, is then they apply to the federal government to stay in the country. And it was a way to try to help people that are fearful of being deported, that are fearful to come forward. And so it was an important thing that needed to be implemented, and I'm the one that came up with the policy for our office, recognizing the need in our prosecutions to have people that are going to feel safe when they're coming in to report a crime and there for the prosecution. It has requirements that they have to cooperate in the reporting and the prosecution also, and so it's a reasonable system. Thank you.
Thank you. And as we get into the 6th question here, I just want to remind the candidates, when you disagree with your opponent, please say so, because the audience needs to know what sets you guys apart. And if there are differences, help us out, help the audience out by noting those differences of opinion on each of these topics. Let's go to the next one for Scott. According to the Death Penalty Information Center website, blacks are more likely to be wrongfully convicted and given the death penalty than their white counterparts, and they're exonerated after a longer period of time. How will you avoid and ensure that wrongful convictions never happen in your particular cases?
You start out by being careful when you're prosecuting cases. When a case comes in from a law enforcement agency, you view it independently. You don't just simply rubber stamp when they want something to be filed and you just file it without adequately going through and independently reviewing it based on your knowledge, your experience, and the law. So that's where you start off by trying to avoid these. You use evidence that is going to be reliable, that you expect is going to be admissible, and is going to stand the test of time. When it comes to reviewing cases that there was a prosecution and there was a conviction and somebody is sentenced, and when they send things in, the way we've been doing it now is that if something is sent to us asking us to review, we assign it to either a prosecutor or somebody in supervision to go through to make sure that everything was done properly. We've had them where they come in. We've assigned investigators sometimes to take a look and make sure that everything was done correctly. Unfortunately, our budgets have gone down. We've lost positions. We would have tried, we talked about starting a unit, at least assigning a prosecutor to do reviews. We just did not have the ability. So we assign them individually as they come in. When it comes to persons that maybe are minorities, that may be disproportionately convicted, you have to always approach a case fairly. You have to judge it on its own merits, its own facts. Don't let race enter into it. When you're looking at a crime, you're looking and you use your conscience and the law. If you apply that, you're most likely to have a correct decision.
One of the things that we can do to prevent unfair convictions is making sure that we get the right person convicted. One of the ways that we can do that is through technology. I'm proud to say that I led the prosecution in Kern County in which new DNA, cutting-edge DNA technology was introduced for the first time west of the Mississippi, the third time in the nation, cutting-edge DNA that I was able to introduce into evidence and then later on use to convict Billy Ray Johnson. That same type of evidence, this DNA evidence, is evidence that is used by places like the Innocence Project. Not in Kern County, we haven't had any of those, but in other places in order to exonerate people. If elected as district attorney, what I will do will be to continue to use DNA evidence and other technology in order to ensure that our convictions are valid. In addition, I'm on the Brady Committee, and one of the things that I have done, the Brady Committee, okay, the Brady Committee is a committee, well, I got a stop sign, you guys, so I'm trying to abide by the rules. The Brady Committee is a committee that is put together in order to evaluate law enforcement, different law enforcement things that have been done that were inappropriate. And one of the things that I did was to look at the crimes that were committed by the law enforcement officers that were stealing from the county, and I went back and I looked at all of those files, every case that they were involved in, and got notices out to the defense. So when we learn of something, something that's been done wrong or whatever, then it's our responsibility, and that's something that I look very seriously at, to make sure that no one is convicted inappropriately.
Thank you. Cindy, the next question goes to you. According to the State of California Department of Justice in 2016, 57% of juveniles were convicted of a misdemeanor, 31% of juveniles convicted of a felony, and 11% convicted of status offenses. What is on your agenda in regards to help controlling juvenile delinquency and preserving the safety of the Kern County community? At the same time, what can be done to improve rehabilitation rates for youth offenders to lower the recidivism rate?
As the gang prosecutor, the gang supervisor, I have seen most of our violent felons are ones that had records as juveniles. And we used to look at preventative measures for juveniles to stay out of gangs and drugs. We'd look at them and try to focus on 16-year-olds, 15-year-olds. Now, unfortunately, we have to focus on 10-year-olds. I've worked in juvenile court on 2 different occasions in my career, and I think it is key to do something to prevent juveniles from falling into delinquency. An ounce of prevention will go so far in juvenile court as far as keeping them out of delinquency. And you know, there are many of us with just one wrong decision away from really ruining our lives as juveniles because so many temptations are there. I will work very hard in order to do whatever I can to work with probation and to work with outreach communities in order to help juveniles. For the last 10 years, I've been working in an organization, and I'm on the board of Bakersfield Safe Streets Partnership. We work very hard in the community in order to get gang members out of crimes, and we also work with mentors. Kids fall into gangs because they don't have good families, good family relationships. They fall into gangs because if they don't have success at school, they find success in gangs. In some circumstances, we're going to have to help the parents, and we as the community are going to have to reach out to those kids and volunteer. People now are not going into service organizations. They're not popular like they once were. At the DA's office, I think it is really important for the leader at the DA's office and to encourage mentorship, both from the district attorneys, ourselves, our employees, our staff, and law enforcement, as well as the community. So trying to nip juvenile delinquency in the bud is of utmost importance to me.
Thank you.
Well, David, we actually started this about 7 years ago. The probation department started a new program. And we went from having 3 deputy district attorneys out of juvenile down to 1. The reason why is because the probation department came up with a matrix. Instead of just throwing kids into juvenile hall and starting them down a system that's going to get them institutionalized, learning from more experienced criminals, They are doing diversion. They have the Bridges Academy. They have other things that they are doing to try to get kids out sooner, out of the justice system. And so that actually started several years ago, and it has been productive. It's not perfect, but it is a smarter way of doing it. Get them out sooner rather than get them institutionalized in their thinking and learning from other criminals. And so we actually have already started doing that. We met with them and agreed to it, and we started to do that. And I actually started about 15 years ago. Some of the younger people in here may know a Life Interrupted program that goes to the schools and teaches the kids about the dangers of drinking and driving and other things. It was a way that I, after handling a number of DUI death cases, was able to finally get to do something that was going to prevent tragedies, because the DA reacts to tragedies. And so I got sick of seeing those cases, and so I joined the nonprofit and helped even with some presentations on those. So those are the types of things to do.
Thank you. Last month, the Chronicle of Higher Education, something that's very important as a weekly newspaper in higher education, had a headline, "After the 2016 election, campus hate crimes seem to jump, and now the data confirm it." So we're seeing more hate crimes across campuses. In your opinion, what is a hate crime, and what charge will you be giving to your team in terms of investigating these types of crimes?
Hate crimes are the crimes that are occurring that are going to be based and are motivated based on persons, their race, their religion, or country of origin, things like that. They're specified in the penal code. And we actually had one that it was a young man. He was Sikh. And so he has a turban, and another man sees him and thinks that he's actually Muslim and yells at him, and thinking he's Muslim and that believing that Muslims are associated with terrorism, he threw a soda at him, and it's on video. And so this young man reported it, and the police did a good job. They tracked him down, and we prosecuted him. We prosecuted it as a misdemeanor hate crime. And I remember when the case was happening, and the Sikh community, they held a press conference. We hadn't even received the case yet. And so they were very frustrated. They felt that things weren't being done. And so I actually called the father of the young man to explain to him, because somebody in our office knew him. And so they gave me the number, and I called and I said, wait for us to get it. We're going to take a look at the facts, what happened. We're going to look at the law, what applies, and we're going to do what is the right thing for the right reasons. We did prosecute the case. And so whenever you have a crime that's motivated on those types of things, then they can be prosecuted as a hate crime. We don't want people that are going to be bullies. They're going to think that they can just intimidate and they can assault people just because they're different. That's not a society, that's not a community that we want to live in.
Thank you. Cindy?
I've prosecuted a number of hate crimes over the years. I've even partnered with the Anti-Defamation League and trained officers on how to investigate hate crimes. I've prosecuted people who have bullied, people who were gay, people who were victimized because they were merely the status of being gay. I've prosecuted people who victimized people because they were of a different race. And it is unacceptable, it is intolerable, and I'm proud of the office and of my work with the Anti-Defamation League and what we've done over the years in order to try to stop hate crimes.
Thank you. The next question goes to you, Cindy. Last year, the Kegley Institute of Ethics here on campus brought award-winning actress and activist Mira Sorvino to campus to talk about sex trafficking. Mm-hmm. It was a very well-attended event that we had in our Doré Theater. In Kern County, there's an average of 750 to 1,000 sex trafficking incidents per month. How would your office work in conjunction with local law enforcement efforts to deter human trafficking?
It's a horrific crime. Have you seen what goes out on Union Avenue, what goes on out there? I've been with law enforcement for many years in an undercover capacity, going out with law enforcement and watching the human trafficking that occurs. We had a case not that long ago where a young girl who was involved as a victim of human trafficking, in essence a prostitute, but she was very young, who helped somebody else and under their direction and control caused a homicide at a pot shop. I mean, there are just so many horrific things that happen to these young people who, because of their age and maybe addiction, perhaps mental illness, their will is overcome. I'll do whatever it takes in order to keep people safe. If that entails, strictly prosecuting these cases, that's something that I really feel very strongly about. I think that we've done a lot of good things in this area in our office as regarding human trafficking and the victimization of young girls who are usually minors in this regard. So I think that's the end of my answer.
Thank you. Scott?
David, this comes down to, I really do left scratching my head when I hear that we can do things better. We've been working very hard for the last 7 years to do things better. That's why we implemented officer-involved shooting reviews. That's why we've done a lot of things about bringing in victim services units. We have tried to address things when budgets have gone down and crime has gone up. So to come in here and say that we can do better, for the last 10 years, Cindy's been the supervisor of the gang unit, yet our gang problem is horrific. Do we blame her for it? No. Do we say that we can do better by replacing her? No. We continue to do what is ethically correct. Follow your conscience in the law. And on human trafficking, we were one of the first counties to successfully prosecute a human trafficking case. Deputy District Attorney Diana Carter, who was in our office, successfully prosecuted one of the first ones when the law was changed. That's what we've been doing.
Thank you. Scott, the next question goes to you. How do you plan to enforce the new marijuana policy in Kern County when cities like Arvin are choosing to follow the state law regulations?
We have to follow the law as it is. We don't write the law. The district attorney enforces the law. So we're going to have to follow the law, and it's very frustrating. As I look at marijuana, marijuana is a lot like, I think, prohibition was back at that time. It's been legalized, yet every city and every county is independently going to be doing that and going through and deciding, do you ban it, do you authorize it, to what extent? There's a lot of money involved in it, lots, not just millions, billions. The influence that is trying to be being exerted by people that are motivated by making a lot of money is very concerning. Each city and county has to make this determination. What we see is, of course, as prosecutors, is the worst of it. We see the DUIs. When you talk about doing better, about 3 years ago, we successfully prosecuted a DUI murder based solely on marijuana. Somebody who was going about 90 miles per hour just down the street, Gosford and Stockdale. Goes over the median, heads on a car with a man and a woman that have just retired and are looking for a retirement home in Bakersfield, killing the husband. We see the worst of it. We see the neglect of kids. We see the abuse of kids. When you look at assaults, when you look at murders, a large number of them are at the base of it because of drugs or alcohol. So we see the worst of it. The cities and the counties have to make the decision what they're going to do. When they make that decision, that is what we're going to enforce. We enforce the law.
Thank you. Cindy?
We do need to enforce the law, and illegal pot shops are unacceptable. What we have seen from my work in the gang unit is those that are running illegal pot shops are gang members. They have cocaine, they have guns, and they need to be enforced. The civil penalties involved that were previously exacted from the city of Bakersfield on pot shops were not working. There were 70 illegal pot shops on October 1st of 2017. The city had been trying for years just to shut them down with civil penalties. That didn't work, so they decided to exact criminal penalties. And for a 2-month period of time, the Bakersfield Police Department sent undercover officers and narcotics task force officers into those marijuana dispensaries, and they shut them down. Out of 70 illegal pot shops, by the end of the year, there were only 68 remaining. Where the pot shops are illegal within the city of Bakersfield, and soon after the moratorium, they will be illegal in the county of Kern. We must, as the district attorney, enforce the law, and if they are illegal, they must be shut down, and those that are in the pot shops must be prosecuted.
Thank you. The next question goes to you, Cindy, and let's call this question Cases in the News, because our students had lots of questions for you about cases that had been in the local press. So we'd like to hear if you would maybe have pursued things differently on a couple of cases. For example, in regards to the Tatiana Hargrove case, where Ms. Hargrove was initially charged for resisting arrest after being misidentified by Bakersfield police officers, what could have been done so that cases like Ms. Hargrove's do not repeat themselves again? Or another example, do you believe that proper legal judgment was rendered in the case of John Jamara, considering his history of previous incidents involving drinking and driving? Would you have pursued a different course of action? So if you wouldn't mind commenting on either one or both of these cases in the news, or you're welcome to share other recent cases and how you feel they should have been adjudicated differently.
In the Tatiana Hargrove case and the John G. Amara case, I did not personally read the police reports and talk to witnesses. It is unfair, and I wasn't involved in the decision-making process. It is unfair for me to criticize the district attorney or those making decisions on those cases when I was not personally involved. I will tell you, however, that peace officers do have the right to detain someone when they have a reasonable cause to believe that the person has committed a crime. They have reasonable cause to detain, and that person must resist, resist. If they have a complaint, they need to complain later, but they have to comply. So comply and complain, and it's usually a better practice to comply when you are in that situation. As it relates to driving under the influence cases and specifically, it's a very complicated legal process to go through when there is a DUI death. You have to jump through certain hoops. The first you determine is whether the person that was driving caused the accident. The second thing that you determine, if they did or did not cause the accident, if they left the scene of the crime, was did they in fact know that they killed someone, and did they leave willingly? So without commenting on the Giamara case, people have to understand that there are certain hoops that you have to jump through legally, and we have an obligation to only file charges if we have a reasonable expectation that we will get a conviction in court.
Thank you. Scott?
On the Tatiana Hargrove case, it's nice to come in here and talk about not making decisions based on limited information, but when I hear from police officers that Ms. Zimmer is telling them she would have filed the case against Ms. Hargrove, that doesn't do any good in our relationships with the law enforcement that then starts to think that we're actively against them. What we did on that case was closely looked at what happened. The stop was okay. It was very limited information. Based on the very limited information, the stop was okay. From that point on, it all went downhill. In looking at discretion in charging people and using the power of the district attorney's office, the power of charging people with crimes, you want a district attorney that's going to fairly meet justice. That case should not have been filed. It wasn't filed. It was an unpopular decision with law enforcement. It's another reason that they're not happy with Lisa Green and why I don't have their endorsements and my competitor does. You have to be careful in approaching it. A GMR case, quickly, when it was submitted to our office, they were asked for criminal charges for felony DUI. It wasn't there. The man that was driving did not cause the accident that led to the death. You couldn't charge it. You have to follow the facts. You have to use your conscience and the law. What we were upset with is that when we filed felony hit and run, that the judge unilaterally reduced that down to a misdemeanor without even hearing the probable cause hearing, the preliminary hearing. We did not agree with that.
Cindy, do you want to respond to that, or do we want to have any more discussion on cases in the news for a moment? I'd welcome that if either of you were interested.
I would not ever file or not file a case unless I have looked at the police reports and talked to the witnesses.
Okay. Scott, anything on that?
You shouldn't also be telling the police you would have filed it then. Stick with it 100% of the time.
You know, we can go on and on and on about something like that. I don't know who he's talking about, what he's talking about, but I can tell you this, law enforcement has chosen to endorse me because they have the confidence in me and what I do. They know me and they know my work. And the law enforcement has chosen to endorse me not because of Tatiana Hargrove, because of 33 years of my experience with law enforcement, of taking the tough cases, taking them into court, and winning them.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move to the next question. Scott, this one starts with you. In terms of the growing homeless population within Bakersfield, there are a significant amount of crimes when the homeless are the victims themselves. The overall victimization rate of the homeless was 56% higher than the general population. Will the homeless aspect of a victim deter you from choosing to prosecute cases that not only concern homeless on homeless crime, but non-homeless on homeless crime as well?
That's quite a matrix. Okay.
I'm happy to repeat it, actually, because
No,
I don't like multi-part questions.
I think I followed it.
We've got multi-part here. So the first part is just, we know that there's a growing homeless population, and what's cited here is that a number of homeless are themselves victims, that the overall victimization rate of the homeless was 56% higher than the general population. So the question really is, would that be a factor, whether someone was homeless or not, in terms of whether you would prosecute cases, whether it's homeless on homeless crime or non-homeless on homeless crime?
If we're talking about assaults, if that's what we're talking about, then the status of the person shouldn't be mattering to me. You know, if somebody's a victim and they happen to be homeless, they happen to be homeless. If somebody's a perpetrator and they happen to be homeless, they happen to be homeless. We should be looking and trying to mete out justice fairly, no matter who the perpetrator is, no matter who the victim is. And so I think that's the most important thing. And you're right, homelessness has gone up. You drive through Bakersfield and you see the problem that exists, and when you hear that it's gone up, I think it was 50%. It's very concerning. And it goes back to, you need to look for different ways to deal with things, especially with our budgets, what they are. It's very costly to incarcerate people. It's a fact. And also, when you're looking, though, it's a small percentage of the population that is committing a large percentage of the crimes. And so if you can find ways to deal with those individuals, if it's a person with alcohol and drug problems, they have opportunities now to go into rehab. The problem is that when you lead the horse to water, they won't always drink. And sometimes they need to reach that rock bottom. If they're not going to address their problems, and then it transfers over to stealing, to neglect of kids, abuse, assault, they need to be dealt with in a way that is going to protect all of us also. And so the status shouldn't matter, but you should be looking for options, like I described, a mental health court that I helped start. There are things that we can try to do differently. We should. We should always be trying to improve.
Thank you. Cindy?
I've worked downtown in Bakersfield in the courthouse for 33 years. And what I have seen downtown with regard to the increase in homelessness there breaks my heart. It breaks my heart. The cause of homelessness is a number of things. One of them, we can't help people or require them to get rehabilitation anymore, because previously possession of narcotics cases, they were felonies and we could require rehab. We can't do that anymore because of the change in the law. They're misdemeanors. So that's a very difficult thing. But when you have a good relationship with law enforcement, they can go out and look for those victims. We have a lot of victims who are the victims of gang crimes and different types of crimes, and they pick on and victimize the homeless because they don't think they'll come to court. And very often they don't come to court. But law enforcement in this community really tries to go out and look for the homeless, and they have a networking system that they can find them. They have a team at the Bakersfield Police Department who impact, or what's called the impact team, and they work with the homeless. So it wouldn't matter to me if the victim was homeless or not. I think that I would work even a little bit harder to protect that person.
Thank you. Audience, we're going to do one more question to the candidates directly, and then after this question, I'll ask Dr. Cargile to bring up the questions that you have. So if you have not had the chance to write down a question for yourself on a note card that you would like to consider, please do so during these answers. Okay. And then after, again, the the audience questions, we'll do closing statements and whatnot from the candidates. But let's do one more question before the audience questions come in. And we will start with Cindy, you on this one. What is the largest organization or unit you've ever run, and why do you think you're equipped to run the DA's office?
I've run a number of units at the DA's office. They varied in number over the year. We used to have less supervisors than we have now. I think that they were up to about 20, 25 people, but I've supervised dozens and dozens of people and trained a number of them. I'm currently supervised the gang unit, and we have about 10 or 11 people, but I have run 9 different units in the office. 9 different units, and the majority of them felony units, including the gang unit, which is a homicide unit. I am more than qualified to run the district attorney's office because I've done every job in that office in addition to supervising them. I have worked every unit. I've appeared in every courthouse in Kern County. I am well acquainted after 3 decades of experience in that office about how to run the office, and I'm more than qualified to do so.
Scott, what's the largest organization unit you've ever run, and why do you think you're equipped to run the DA's office?
It's the DA's office. I help run the DA's office, 250 employees. I work the budget. Cindy has never worked the budget. I work personnel matters. She's never worked personnel matters. I go before the Board of Supervisors to argue for the budget. I argue for things that we need. I sign off on contracts. I sign off on agreements with other agencies. I am helping to run the office. When Lisa Green, who's here now, when she's out of the office, I'm the acting district attorney. I am making the decisions that are final decisions on cases. I am in on the serious cases that the DA weighs in on. Most often, it is Lisa and I are the final 2 that are talking through key things that go on in our office for the last 7 years. I've helped to run an office that's 250 people, not supervising 10 people. So that's the experience that I have. That's what makes me the most qualified to run this office, to transition over from day one. That's the reason that I have the endorsements of 5 elected DAs in this state, and we'll work with them to better get some laws that protect us.
Okay, thank you to you both. For this portion of the program, if you need the 2 minutes, you can have it, and a 1 minute for rebuttal. If you wish to save time for the end, that's fine as well. So, first audience question. Thank you, Dr. Cargile, and the students as well for helping put these together. The current ethnic composition of the DA's office is about 6% African American, which is reflective of Kern County's 6% African American population. Yet your Latino representation is, I need help with this one, Dr. Cargile.
It's very low.
It's very low. Okay. Yeah, I see it as less than 2%. I'm sorry, folks. I'm reading somebody's handwriting and doing my best. The Latino representation is less than 2%, when the Latino population of Kern County is approximately 52%. As a public service agency, which depends on public credibility to function, if elected as DA, what will you do to make the ethnic makeup of the DAs in your office more reflective, the attorneys in your office more reflective of the community you serve?
Is that for me?
Who started the last one? I think Cindy started the last one, so Scott, please, thank you. And you'll have 2 minutes if you need it, and then 1 minute rebuttals if you need it.
It's higher than, I can tell you it's higher than 2%, I can tell you that. However, it's unacceptably low. The problem is that in the legal community, the number of persons that I believe that identify as being Latino or Hispanic is very low. And so whenever we can, it's a benefit to us, especially people that speak Spanish. Many of our victims are Spanish speaking. I've had murder cases where it's very frustrating when I'm trying to communicate with a victim's family. that only speaks Spanish. I'm frustrated. I wish that I knew Spanish better, that I'd be able to communicate with them, to be able to relate to them what the case is involving, what procedurally is going to happen, to answer the questions without having to go through an interpreter. It pains me. I remember one woman, her husband was killed, and she was devastated. And it really did pain me that I couldn't have that type of communication, that I could make her understand that I cared as much as I did about the case, and I was there to answer her questions, to help. So to try to find people, we're always actively looking for people to apply to our office. We're a government office. We have to go through a civil service form of hiring that is very long and it can be tedious, and I wish that we had more people that were applying that did reflect our population. Unfortunately, our population is not reflected the same way in the legal community, in attorneys. And so, where we can, we want to hire people that reflect our population, and especially Spanish-speaking people, to help the victims of our cases.
Thank you. Cindy?
I've served on the hiring committee at the district attorney's office for over 25 years. I was the chairman for many years. The key to getting people, good people, to come to our office is recruitment. We used to go out to the law schools and recruit at the law schools and have them come to Kern County. That's how I got hired. Somebody came to Loyola Law School from the Kern County DA's office and sat down and interviewed with me and recruited me to come. We need to do that, and we need to do that in many of the law schools, because it is important. It is important to have the Latino community reflected in our office. But I think we have to start earlier than law school. We have to go out to the high schools. For the last 10 years, I've been out in the community working with different pastors and Manuel Carrizales, talking to kids, trying to get them to go to school. It's one of the reasons I teach at Taft College, because I care. I teach in their political science department, in their criminal justice program, and I encourage them to go to law school, to go on, because I want to make the difference in the life of somebody. And I tell them all about my office. I invite them to come down and shadow me, which many of my students have. So it's really important to recruit young people who will come to our office from this community, because if they're from this community, they will stay in this community.
Thank you. Cindy, why don't you take this one first? We have a gang and opioid problem in this county, but there is an alcohol epidemic where many drive under the influence. We are seeing more and more drunk drivers who have multiple convictions. As DA, what will you do to ensure that more of these incidents are prosecuted?
Well, I will follow the law. I've been a misdemeanor supervisor and many supervisor over the years, in which I've dealt with DUI cases as well as gang cases and opioid cases. I think that it's very, very important. I mean, the victims are so vulnerable. We could all be the victim of a DUI collision. I will follow the law and prosecute those cases. One of my close friends here, who is here today, Jim Simpson, is probably the most qualified person in our office regarding DUI prosecutions. He is a close partner, and we talk a lot about that kind of thing. It's very important to me to prosecute those cases. But those are not the only cases in which people are victimized. Yes, we have a huge gang problem. And yes, I have been doing a good job for the last 10 years. I can tell you that we have locked up many, many notorious and dangerous people, and the community is much safer because of our efforts and the efforts of the people in my unit. I do have concerns about opioids. I'll tell you, it hits close to home to me, because I lost my best friend because of an opioid addiction. A registered nurse who got hooked on opioids after a fall on a horse. My best friend since 6th grade. So it hits me very personally. I understand what's going on in the community regarding opioid abuse. And we got to do what we can to get those kind of pills out of the hands of teenage kids so they don't go down that direction.
Thank you, Scott.
So we actually have a unit that's dedicated to felony prosecutions for DUI. It's that big of a problem. I have handled several felony DUI murder cases. That's why I got involved in Life Interrupted, to try to prevent them, to go to the schools, to talk to the kids about not driving while impaired, and not getting into a car with somebody who is impaired. And so that's some of the things we've done, is that we have actually finished our 1,000th felony DUI prosecution over the course of the last 7 years that we've had the Officer of Traffic Safety, our DUI unit. That's how serious we have taken it. I take it personally because I have handled a number of these felony cases. I have been the one to talk to the families to try to help them through it. And my first one was 20 years ago. I just saw the family 2 weeks ago. I still keep in touch with them. It means that much to me, and I wanted to try to stop it. That's why I got involved in Life Interrupted. You vigorously prosecute it because it can affect any one of us.
Thank you. Scott, take this next one. Name your 2 or 3 largest accomplishments, 2 or 3 largest accomplishments at the DA office, and explain why that will make you a great DA. And then we'll have Cindy answer the same question.
Well, the first one that comes to mind is it's the Victim Services Unit. The Victim Services Unit is where we brought in advocates for victims to help them through the process, to help them to understand what it was about, to help the families, to help to give them a voice in the court. And so we brought in the Victim Services Unit within the last 7 years. I went down and visited places to try to figure out how to best form it here. I helped to create it. Another thing that, second thing that I can think of is going to be, it's going to be the mental health court. No, I'm sorry. It's going to be the Veterans Justice Program. They're very similar. They're 2 programs. They're diversionary courts, so I guess you can count them as one. The Veterans Justice Program is helping veterans with PTSD. They've served our country. They've committed a lower-level crime, and it refers them to Veterans Services. That way, if they're homeless, it gets them into a structured environment. It addresses often alcohol, drug abuse problems. It's going to deal with the PTSD. It tries to get them vocational training. The Veterans Services are going to be there for a lot of different things to help them and get them out of the revolving door of the justice system. The other one is mental health. Mental health court, I went and visited a couple of different places that had mental health courts. We didn't have one. And so on behalf of the District Attorney's Office, I helped to form this. And it's to try to get them out of the system, back on their feet. For both of them, it's for them to take responsibility for themselves. Incarceration costs a lot of money, even if it's in the installment plan that they come in and out and in and out. And that's often what you have with these particular 2 groups. And as a society, veterans that have served our country that have PTSD, and people with mental illness, bona fide mental illness, if as a society we are not trying to help them, then what are we doing? So I'm very proud of those.
Thank you. Cindy, your 2 or 3 biggest accomplishments?
My biggest accomplishments are the people that I've helped, not programs that I've started, the individual people that I've helped. I prosecuted one of the largest and longest, most complicated gang cases in Kern County history, in which 3 country boy Crips gunned down 3 people, a 19-year-old girl who was pregnant, and shot and paralyzed another. And one of the defendants had only been out of custody 4 months after he'd been convicted of killing someone else. The victim's mother of the 19-year-old girl sat in court the entire 5-month trial, not understanding a word of English because she was Spanish speaking. But she sat there and she came every day. And when they read the verdict of guilty, 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 in which these guys were sentenced to life without the possibility of parole, she and I, even though that we didn't understand each other's language, knew that her daughter's death was not in vain. And so that was one of my greatest accomplishments. And that case was a case that went up to the California Supreme Court and has been a published opinion and made new law. So the gang cases that I have prosecuted and other cases in which I have propelled justice forward in complicated, lengthy, difficult cases are one of my greatest accomplishments. My second greatest accomplishment are the people that I have trained, people who have gone on to be judges, people who have gone on to win Prosecutor of the Year. 2 people that I've trained went on to become state prosecutors of the year. And they are very grateful to what I have been able to do for them, and many of whom are here tonight to support me. So the cases that I have done, as well as the people that I have trained.
Thank you. Each of you mentioned a little bit about biography in your opening statement, which was great. This question from an audience member is, what is the most important, and they underline most important, what is the most important thing we need to know about you before we vote in June?
For me, it's going to be my dedication to victims. For me, it started in law school. I worked a 1-800 line for victims. It was the Victims Resource Center. It was literally 1-800 victims. It was before the internet. It was a place where it was primarily sexual assault and domestic violence victims would call because they were looking, and some of them desperately, for help. It referred them to rape crisis centers. It referred them to the law enforcement. It referred them to some services that they needed. That's where it started for me. That's where it started for the dedication to victims and handling all of the cases, the thousands of cases that I've handled through my career. That has been the emphasis for me, was to help people. I have not worked my career, in any part of my career, towards trying to become the district attorney. I was swinging a hammer before I came here. I got a job higher than I ever thought I ever would. But for me, it started with victims, and that's the most important thing to me.
Thank you. Cindy?
What you need to know about me is that I have a person of enormous courage. And for the last 7 years, I have gone to court and tried personally some of Kern County's most notorious, dangerous criminals in high-profile jury trials, difficult jury trials in which we've been able to propel issues forward. In the last 7 years, I've been in trial just under 400 days on very, very difficult cases. I have the courage to go in and do that, tried very dangerous individuals. My opponent in the last 7 years has been in a trial on one case in which somebody else prepared, in which he was sitting second chair to that other person, and he didn't even do the prelim. So I have the courage to go do things. You need to know that I am an expert in a number of topics. I've indicted more than 25 people before Kern County grand juries. I'm an expert in DNA in a number of areas. I am an expert in witness relocation under the California Witness Relocation Project. Many of my witnesses have been threatened, and we have to move them. These are things that you have to know how to do in order to become district attorney. When someone wants to know how to do something, you need to tell them because you have done it. You have been there. You can lead by example because you know how to do the job.
Thank you. For these last two questions, there were audience members who had one question for Cindy and one question for Scott specifically. So let's keep these to like under a minute, but then if the other person wants to respond, that's okay. So the question for Scott is, if you don't believe your office has room for improvement or can do things better, why do you want to be DA?
I think there is room for improvement. You should always be looking to improve. If you're not, you're stagnant and bad things happen. You should always be looking to improve. When we took over, Lisa and I took over 7 years ago, we recognized the need to improve things. We brought in victim services. We brought in the Veterans Justice Program. We brought in the Mental Health Court. We brought in the advanced DNA that she's talking about. I'm the one that oversees the crime lab. I am the one that authorized how to get that technology here so that our attorneys could use it. She did not bring it here. Our lab did. Our lab is the one that developed it. Bringing that technology here. Now we have ballistics. It's going to be coming online soon that's going to help to solve some violent crimes. Cutting-edge ballistics is going to solve violent crime cases. We've had to deal with a budget, so we had to be innovative. We had to improve. And so we have done that all during a time that crime has been going up. We've been doing more with less.
Cindy, do you want to respond to any of that?
Yes, we must do better. We cannot sit in a situation like we are right now with having children killed as a result of gang violence. We cannot accept that. We have to do better. We have to reach out to the community and work harder. We have to do better. We have to open lines of communications with minority communities. We have to continue to work harder with pastors in churches and get a community idea that we have to do better. We cannot have a year in 2018 like 2017 in which there are a record number of homicides. We have to shift our focus and our energies and our resources on curbing and reducing the amount of violent crime in Kern County. We must do better, not just for the children in Rosedale, but for the children in East Bakersfield who walk to school in the morning and hear gunfire. That is unacceptable. We must do better.
Thank you. And Cindy, this question is for you, and then we'll allow Scott an opportunity to rebut if he'd like. For Ms. Zimmer, you claim that rank-and-file law enforcement supports you. How many associations that endorsed you let their entire membership vote on that endorsement?
Okay. The Delano Police Department, their entire police department came and sat in a meeting and they voted on the endorsement. The Ridgecrest Police Department, that also supports me, came and their entire membership voted to endorse. As far as the Bakersfield Police Department, their board voted, but they had a very large member turnout, and I believe it was, except for one person, unanimous of everyone that voted in that meeting. The Kern Law Enforcement Association, who also votes to endorse me, which encompasses hundreds of people, had a very large open meeting. And mind you, both of us went and presented to every one of these organizations. And they all voted to endorse me. They had a very large organization in a meeting. The board ended up voting to endorse.
Thank you, Scott. Do you have anything you want to add to that?
Well, the sheriff's one, the Kern Law Enforcement Association, they had a large meeting when I spoke to them. Their board told the large meeting, which was fairly evenly divided, that they were going to wait to decide on that and they were going to table it. After everyone left, the board voted and decided to endorse Ms. Zimmer. When you're looking at endorsements can lead you to understand how certain people think. And when it's just a union board, you have to look and see what's the union board's biggest concern. And I did not make them any promises other than to follow my conscience and the law. I did not make them any backdoor promises. They understand that that's the way that I have always been, and that's the way that I will be. If it takes things that are going to be said to them, promises made to them, that wouldn't be shared openly here, and if that's what it takes to get the DA, if belonging to a political machine with politicians that are pushing so hard to have the DA's office as part of their stable, if that's what it takes, then I don't want this job.
Thank you, and thank you, audience members, for those questions. We're doing well on time, and we're going to go into some closing statements that we will allow each candidate 3 minutes, if they wish, to go through that closing statement. But candidates, I have a question for you that I would ask you to consider as a part of your closing statement. I would like you to speak directly to our students here tonight on this one, because some of these students might be newly registered to vote or voting for the first time this year. Can you give them your best answer on why they should vote for you? Cindy, you will go first on the closing statement because Scott went first on the intro.
Okay. Thank you all very much for coming. I really appreciate it. You've been a wonderful audience. On June 5th, the voters of Kern County will elect a new district attorney. I am the best person for the job. I have the experience, the skills, and the courage to do what is right for the citizens of Kern County. I have the experience. I have 33 years in that office, a decade more than my opponent. I am different than my opponent. I was appointed as a supervisor over 20 years ago, and I've supervised 9 different units, felony units, most of them. My opponent, before he was made the assistant district attorney by his friend Lisa Green, had supervised 2 units, both entry-level units. I have been the gang supervisor for 11 years. That is a homicide unit. There are difficult decisions that you make in the homicide unit. My opponent has never worked in the gang unit, supervised the gang unit, or supervised a homicide unit. The gang problem is the #1 public safety problem in this town, in this county. And I am best suited in order to be the next district attorney because no one has experience in this area like I do. I'm different than my opponent because I have unique skills. I know about DNA. I haven't just read about it and theorized about it. I've actually put it on in court, cutting edge level DNA. I've put on a number of other different types of evidence and trained victims and trained witnesses and talked about grand juries and indicted people in front of grand juries. And I have the endorsement of law enforcement, not because there is a secret deal. How insulting is that to law enforcement, that they would be involved in some sort of conspiracy to endorse me because I wouldn't file a case against them? Or I would file a case against them? What is the secret deal? There is no secret deal. What it is an excuse in order to justify why law enforcement unanimously, rank and file men and women who put their lives on the line every day, have chosen to endorse me. And you know what? They asked me to run. They didn't just endorse me. They came to me and asked me to run for district attorney. In addition, I have the endorsement of important people in the community, important because I know them and I work with them, like Mayor Go, who has reached out many times to people. She's a mentoring program, and I've worked with her for years and years. But I'm telling you that I have the courage to go forward because I will put myself out there. I will go to court, and I am the one that will go to court and personally prosecute people. Like I told you, 380 days in trial, killers, rapists. You know, go to court when you don't have to, when your supervisor's telling you to. I am a supervisor. I don't have to go to court. But I supervise during the day, and I work on my cases at night, on the weekends, because you know what? You lead by example. And I would never ask anybody in that district attorney's office to do something that I wouldn't do myself, and that is go to court and try the hard cases, win or lose. So I'd ask you, if you're not registered to vote, to go register. And I'd ask you to cast your vote on June 5th. And I'll tell you this, I would be so honored to have your vote. Thank you.
You know how you can tell an aggressive DA, prosecutor, is that they go to trial. She's right. I've done 105 felony jury trials. I don't know where she was during the time I was doing all of that. I have done 21 murder trials. I'll give her a chance to address that, but I think it's about 4 or 5 for her. I have done 20 sexual assault trials. I don't think she's even done 5 of those. I agree with her on that. Lead by example. That is what I have done. You know, when you're trying to get people to favorably look at you, you may kind of twist things around. I have done a lot of trial work. In the last 7 years, have I done as much? No. I've been helping to lead the office, to deal with the budgets, the personnel, the policies, the procedures, the Board of Supervisors, and still did a trial 2 years ago. I've done a trial more recently than she has. I have not spent the last 5 to 7 years trying to build a resume to run for DA. I have spent my career helping victims, being there with them, handling many more cases that have gone to trial. That is what I have been doing through my career. For 7 years, I've been helping to lead an office that has had to make big decisions, that has had to make decisions that somebody's going to be, the bigger the decision, the more likely somebody's going to be upset with it. You make the right decision for the right reasons. You apply justice fairly. When you take a look at who you're going to vote for DA, you should look for the person with law enforcement experience, me. As a military police officer, I carried a gun, I carried a badge, I carried handcuffs. I have that experience. I have the experience of looking for a grand theft auto suspect in a warehouse area. It's frightening. I understand that when the police officers go out there and make those sacrifices, I understand that. You should be voting for somebody with a lot of courtroom experience that knows what's needed You can't point the finger at me and say I haven't done DNA. My first DNA case was about 20 years ago. It's not something novel and new to me. I recognize the need to have the cutting-edge DNA. That's the reason I made sure that we were able to bring it in to our crime lab. I have been the one that has been there in court. I have had the times where I've been dealing with kids to talk to them about terrible things that have happened to them. 20 of those trials, putting them on the stand, the god-awful things they have to talk about. Rape victims, molest victims. I know that's why we needed to bring in the victim services, the victims advocates to better help them. Just like when I was back in law school, talking to them on the phone where they're crying. I know that. Leading attorneys, she points and says that I never supervised a homicide unit. Yes, I did. And I have a roster that I brought because she said that before. I have a roster showing that I supervise our special prosecutions unit that handles murders and sexual assault cases. She may not remember back then because she wasn't doing trials back then. I think there's about a 10 to 15 year period she didn't do a single trial. I appreciate the work that she has done. She's a good prosecutor. I'm the one that has the law enforcement experience. I have the courtroom experience. I have the leadership experience from day one, knowing how to be the DA. And that's the reason that I'm running. It's not for the power of it. It's not to make police unions happy. And I do have law enforcement association endorsement. I have the largest one in our county, the California Correctional Peace Officers Association. I have their endorsement. They're the only ones that waited until after the filing deadline to see who was all running. That's why I'm running. And I ask for your vote June 5th. Thanks.
He went over. Do you want another minute?
I beg your pardon?
He went over some, which we allowed. Would you like any
Yeah, there
more
are
time?
certain things that my opponent has said that isn't true, and I think that you have to be very careful when you are a prosecutor to make sure when you accuse people of things that you are right with your facts. But I have done a number of cases, a number of homicides. I've convicted 12 people of murder, and I certainly have not been out of trial for 10 to 15 years. Well, thank you.
Okay, thank you. And I just want to do a couple of thank yous here, but first ask the audience, do you feel more informed tonight about these two candidates? We want to thank these candidates very, very much for coming to CSUB. Thank you. Secondly, I want to thank the library and the library staff again, and Drs. Crabell and Cargile for putting this together. And then I wanted to ask the students who are here tonight, who either assisted with developing some questions, even if they were questions that weren't used, or helped tonight with the audience and the logistics. Would you please stand so we can give you a round of applause? Thank you so much for all you've done tonight to make this work. So to our audience, thank you as well. You were a terrific audience and very patient, and we really appreciate that. The candidates will be staying around for questions if you have questions you would like to ask each of them. And so thank you again to Cindy and to Scott for your time this evening. Good luck on the campaign. Thank you to everyone, and have a great night.
Thank you very much.